Good morning, guys. Hope you're doing okay. It's been a bit of a crazy weekend, hasn't it? Welcome to this podcast. Remember, if you want to download it in audio format, the whole podcast, the hour-long show, is on Spotify and your favourite podcast app. So with me is Neil and Jeff. They were both on last week, and, well, it's been a tumultuous weekend. On Saturday at 9 o'clock, we heard the news that Eddie was leaving the club by mutual consent. And to say it's been a roller coaster season for AFC Bournemouth, well, it's been a roller coaster week, because on Tuesday we heard this positivity that came out of the club through a statement that was released from the owner saying about how he's committed to getting us back into the Premier League. And most of us thought that would be with Eddie. But on Saturday at 9 p.m, as mentioned, not to be the case. Jeff, how are you?
Yeah, it's been a tumultuous week. I felt better after last week's show, and I felt better after Max's statement. Ake going was sort of expected, and I think that was arguable whether that was a good deal or not a good deal, but I thought it was actually all right to get 40 million for him. And then the bombshell on Saturday, which has been a bit of an unexpected and also quite devastating blow. I think it's got us all thinking in a completely different way to where we were probably on Tuesday.
It's one of these things that fans have been toying with, especially when we've been poor in that second half of the season. But, you know, that still doesn't reduce the shock level by any stretch of the imagination, because the feeling is almost of numbness for me. I don't know what it's like for you.
Yeah, I feel a bit bereft. I feel like someone's, passed away. That's what it feels like. Which, I mean, it's all a bit over dramatic. We are in the middle of a terrible pandemic, and I don't want to get into comparisons like that. But it's more than just a manager leaving. That's the thing. We are a different type of club to other football clubs, and you can read all the sort of statements or the news pieces that have been put out there already, and you just read them and you think they don't get it. They don't actually understand what it is about this club that makes it so special and why Eddie was an intrinsic part of it. They're talking about, he should have got other jobs, bigger clubs. That's not what it's about. He's not a normal football manager. And that, again, I think makes it quite shocking.
Yeah, I said on the show that was live straight after the announcement that, there were a lot of other fans coming onto the chat and, giving us grief, even from Manchester United and Liverpool fans, which you think, well, are you looking at Bournemouth, small tin pot club, and you're trying to get one over us by, laughing your heads off? I thought it was, that's a sign of how far we've actually come. But like you say, there are other teams who get through their managers like they do kitchen towels. And it's one of those things that makes us a different club, and we're very unique. But maybe this is the start of us just being any other run-of-the-mill club. Who knows? Neil Dawson, how did you hear the news on Saturday night?
I got a text from my son. I was in the middle of moving house, so he texted me, and that was the first that I was aware of it. And then I jumped online and obviously caught up with everything else that was happening. But as Jeff said, people don't really understand our club. I think a lot of people think we're kind of the size of a Huddersfield or one of those sort of clubs. They don't realise that we're actually like a Rochdale. We're not even like a Plymouth, really. We're more like an Exeter, aren't we? So, and that's the bit that I think, when you listen to these phone-in shows and people are saying, maybe he should move on or maybe he should go. I think that's the bit that they just really don't understand the size of our football club. I think only we understand the size of our football club and the magnitude of what he's achieved.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've been in the Premier League for 5 years, but, we know we're small, but we're getting so much media. I mean, over the weekend, Jeff was doing stints on 5 Live. He was chatting after Kris Temple alongside Tommy Elphick, and there was a good sizable stint. There's been media crews outside the Vitality, and it seems that maybe other fans think we're bigger than what we are, but only we seem to know. But the reaction on the AFC Bournemouth timelines and on the forums, it's been a feeling of numbness. As Jeff said, he's been feeling, bereft. There's been a whirlwind of emotions, and not least, I think it's multiplied by the fact that we have to make decisions and get things done really quickly. This is not the average 3-month, 4-month break from football or whatever it usually is. We've got 6 weeks to turn things around. And in my mind, there's a whirlwind of emotions right now, Neil. It's going to be a busy old time, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably, I wouldn't say it's manageable really, because we've got to get whoever we get in, and I think that's we'll probably come on and talk to that. That's going to be a really crucial decision for the club, because my overriding feeling is we've got two emotions. We've got the emotion of Eddie going. Once we've parked that and dealt with that emotion, then we've got to move on to the fact of what was it that he heard, which was why he went, because I think that's potentially long term as almost as important as him leaving, because clearly he heard something about the direction of the football club, I would imagine, that he's therefore made a decision on the back of. And I think that's probably not quite sunk in for a lot of fans yet. We're still dealing with the Eddie piece, but I think there's that piece in itself is large.
Jeff, the fact that it was mutual consent tends to suggest that maybe the board weren't giving Eddie the guarantees that what he needed, either with the training ground or with particular signings or money or whatever. And it's always been something that we feared once we did get relegated to the Championship. But our job now has become almost like tenfold as difficult without Eddie, in my opinion. And my levels of optimism for how we're going to be dealing with the season have dropped. And I'd be happy just to stay in the league this year.
Yeah, I think the motivations for why he made that decision will be really very interesting to explore. Obviously, a lot's been said about his tiredness during the season. He was looking like he wasn't enjoying it for large parts of the season. There were issues that he had to deal with. I mean, he's dealt with injury issues before, but I'm not sure he's had the people management issues for so much of the season in the past. I think also trying to get the team right for the matches that he was playing. I mean, we had the best quality team that we've ever had, and yet worst performance in 5 seasons in the Premier League, and that I think must have frustrated him. There's a lot of pride and professional pride about Eddie that I think probably had something to do with it as well, that he felt he wasn't able to get the players to play the way that he wanted to that standard. So there's all of that stuff, and then there's what's going on within the club that we're not privy to. We can speculate about. I wonder whether there's talk of perhaps a director of football coming in, perhaps, that he's not that keen on because he is fully in control of what he's got. And it seems pretty clear to me, one of the things this season is it did get too much for him. And maybe there's something about that. Not sure. I think we could look at the investment statement that Max put out and think, yeah, everything's rosy because that's what Max has said. But we don't know the detail. And, Neil could absolutely be spot on. Maybe there aren't the guarantees around what's going to be invested in the squad or what needs to happen, or maybe there are more players being sold than we're aware of at the moment. I mean, I think tumultuous. I mean, we ain't seen nothing what it's going to be like over the next few weeks. We're going to have a new coach, we're going to have a new setup, we're going to have pre-season friendlies, we're going to have players leaving, players coming. We've got loads more to go of this sort of stuff.
Yeah, I do agree. And it's interesting about, the reasons why he went. And I'm not even sure whether we'll actually find out. And there are some people that are maybe suggesting that, Maxim's a businessman. He could see that we were struggling at the bottom of the league around Christmas. And, we've always been in those kind of areas of the league. I mean, we dropped like a stone since October, November, really. And you just sort of, you wonder whether Maxim wanted a change earlier, because some people have been suggesting he was wanting to get him gone in January, but maybe Jeff Mostyn, being the sentimentalist that he is, kind of persuaded Maxim to keep him on. And this has perhaps almost been written in the stars for the last few months. But what's your kind of your take, Neil, on the possibilities of why it has happened?
I think had he wanted to keep him, he would have kept him. Had he wanted him to go, rather, he'd have got rid of him in January or February. So I don't think there's any logic, and I think he will be a logical man, and he will be advised by logical people. There was no point in if you were going to make a hard-nosed decision about Eddie Howe, the time to make that was January. There's no point in making it now, because what we would have had with Eddie was a manager who knows how to win the championship and a manager who knows how to work with less resources. So he had the perfect manager for the championship. So I could have understood it, although I would have been very disappointed had he sacked Eddie in January. I can't understand it now. So I do think they've got a good relationship. I think they've sat down. I think a lot of football clubs post-COVID are looking at very, very little revenue. A lot of companies worldwide are making decisions about capital expenditure on building projects and reducing them or not doing them. And I think he's effectively, Eddie wanted to stay if he was going to keep the playing squad together and build a legacy around a training ground and a stadium. I think he's been explained to him that unfortunately that won't be happening in the current economic climate. And I think the two of them have made a mutually amicable decision, would be my guess. None of us really know, but that's the way I think it probably would have played out. I don't think, unless we find out, Willow's intimated there might be something stranger afoot, but until we hear that, my take on it would be as I just described.
Yeah, and you've just encapsulated it really. There's such a whirlwind of emotions, and there's lots of players that bought into the Eddie Howe philosophy, and those players now, I'm starting to wonder, well, will we be able to retain them? Players like Lloyd Kelly, Chris Mepham, are they maybe going to look elsewhere? Now, of course, we can talk about new managers, etc. And do we bring in someone from the outside, or do we look internally? And people have been talking about Stephen Purchase or whatever, but surely if we've got rid of Eddie, that now's time for a fresh start. And if we went with someone internal like Purchase, we'd just be basically the same as we are now, but arguably with a manager of less quality.
Yeah, can't disagree with that. I think I'll tell you what I think as well is important, right? The whole sort of Eddie as family man, we shouldn't underestimate that. You could see that he had little of that passion that he used to have, even a couple of seasons ago. That 4-1 win we got against Leicester, we barely celebrated that, and that I think speaks to an Eddie who wasn't loving the job as much, and wanting to spend more time with your family is a real cliche, but it's stressful doing that job. How stressful it was this season when he was under so much pressure. There are loads of things going on the playing side, let alone on what could have been happening in the club that might have messed him about. And if he's finished the season now, we've got 6 weeks turnaround. He's got to put the amount of effort in to figure out, of those 23 clubs in the championship, what are their strengths and weaknesses. All that research, 46 games he's committing himself to next season. Bloke needs a break. I completely get that. And you can't say as a football manager, Eddie, take 6 months off and then come back and see how you feel after that. Have a rest. And you know what it's like. If you don't enjoy a job anymore, it's hard to motivate yourself to actually do it. So I wouldn't underestimate any of that as a factor in his decision making. I think we may well go with someone who knows the championship really well, because we'll need that intelligence straight off the bat. We can't mess about. If we're gonna survive, let alone finish top half or whatever, we've got to start running straight away.
Yeah, we have to. It is a manager's job that encompasses so much at Bournemouth, more than any other club. And I've said it before on many a podcast. He's involved in so many different aspects within the club, even the marketing, lots of different things that goes out, and it's almost like he's sort of taken on too much. I mean, he's not unique in that there are other managers in the Premier League that have had more games to manage this season, and they've been in jobs for long periods of time. So what do you think it is, Neil, that has caused Eddie to look so fatigued? Because he has visibly fatigued, whereas previously I'm sure he has felt tired, but he just carries on and carries on. But this time it seems to be a bit too much for him.
Yeah, I mean, he even picks the colour of the kit and the design of the. I was thinking the other day when the new manager arrives and someone says to him, "Do you want V-neck or do you want round neck?" He's probably going to be thinking, "Guys, what did my predecessor actually do?" So I think it's. I mean, his roots reach out throughout the entire club, which make him a very unusual football manager. And I think I was reflecting on who I would choose, or if I was, the board, who I would choose. And I think the two things that we need. I think the first thing is we need someone that can work with limited resources. I think whatever decision's been made, I think that's clearly a decision based on the amount of resources we're going to have for next year. And the second thing, I think it's got to be someone that's got a really strong personality, because when you take over from someone that's been a legend, it's really, really difficult. And I think we've seen that in a number of clubs, in Manchester United, Borussia Dortmund. When you're following in people like Ferguson or Klopp, it's really, really hard. And although obviously Eddie's not reached the heights of those in his career, it's exactly the same issue in terms of Bournemouth that anyone coming in will have, because he was all encompassing throughout the club. So I think we're looking for someone that can work with small resources, and someone that's got a really good personality that will get the whole club to move on, Eddie, because the fans will be seeing his name for weeks, and we can just see it's going to be a really difficult job. So I was thinking, if you reflect on that, my top two would be Gareth Ainsworth at Wycombe or Nigel Pearson.
How much do you think the coronavirus, Jeff, has had an effect on all this? Because I'm sure Eddie loves to communicate with the fans, both in person and visibly. He's always turning around and waving to people in the main stand. And I can imagine that's for a small club like us, where it's relied on more than any other club in the Premier League. I can imagine it's been quite a sort of loss for him. And he's a family man. He's a people person. He's a good man manager, and he's had none of that. Do you think a virus from China has basically lost Eddie his job?
Well, we can blame it for a lot of things. Why not blame it for that? If you go back to our last game pre-lockdown, which was Liverpool away, and we put in a decent performance. I mean, it was a classic performance from the season, wasn't it? We could have got a draw, and instead we lose 2-1. We have a player who gets injured, and it kind of turns the game, and we make a couple of mistakes, and they score. That game, sounds familiar. That game was actually quite an encouraging one to watch as a fan, because you thought Fraser was actually putting in a performance in that game. Callum Wilson scored, which was the first time he'd scored for a while, and the team was playing with an intensity and a passion that felt like old Bournemouth. Now, looking forward to the next game, which would have been Palace at home, I think we'd have got a totally different performance out of the team if it had been the week after, rather than wait 9 weeks and then start again, because we were just in a different mindset. And actually, I think it did have a factor, because we didn't come out of the lockdown very well at all in those two crucial games that we had to win at home. We didn't turn up, and the fans missing was a big part of that. I'm sure we'd have got behind the team for that Palace game, and we'd have got a totally different result, possibly. Certainly got a totally different performance than we got. So I think the fans mattered. Eddie made a big point about how important the fans were, and I believe him. I think that did affect the players negatively. We've not got much at the Vitality to scare other teams. What we do have is a small pitch and fans right on top of you, and we create a hell of an atmosphere for 10,000 supporters. So I'm sure that would have made a difference. Thanks coronavirus.
It's not just a manager. I mean, I know that it's rumored that JT is going to take over in the interim and all these sort of different bits and pieces. But if Eddie goes, for a person that's been involved in so much, there's going to be big shoes to fill, and no one can just do what he did, because he was an exceptional manager that, had his fingers in so many pies, sort of within the club. It almost needs a restructure, Neil, doesn't it? From the management up, or even management down, whichever way you want to look at it. It's not just one person that needs to be replaced. So do you think this will mean that there'll be some of the coaches in the first team that will probably be very nervous now?
Yeah, I think whoever comes in will want a clean sheet, because there'll be too much residue of Eddie around, and there'll be too much talk of it wasn't like this when Eddie was here. And that's just the nature of anyone that's done any job in leadership. When you take over from someone, those things just aren't helpful for you. So I think that, I would imagine that anyone worth their salt coming in is going to come in and say, I'll join, but I want this coach, I want this fitness coach, because that's the way that the world of football works. Just as, when Eddie takes his next job, I would imagine they'll all go with him, because football managers have very little time and they need people around them that they can trust, because they only get half a season often before someone makes a decision on them. So, yeah, I would be exceptionally nervous if I was Stephen Purchase or Jason Tindall.
And, we all, of course, wish Eddie the best with his health and that he has the break, that he needs. Jeff, when do you think would be the feasible time for him to come back into management? Because it was clear that really this break that we got of 6 weeks was never really going to be enough, given that all the stuff he's got to do. I mean, I think players are coming back in for training on August the 11th. That is no time, even a fortnight's holiday would not have been enough for him, really, would it?
No, I'm really struggling to see what his next job is. Can you see him uprooting himself from Bournemouth after what happened at Burnley to go to any other side? So what does that mean? Is he going to be Southampton's manager and commute? He could do that after Hassan Hutel goes. Could do that, possibly, but will a lot of bigger clubs give him that sort of freedom to pick his own team and be so embedded? If he wants to be that controlling, will that be permitted at a bigger club?
And do you think he would like that? Do you think he would like to just be able to concentrate on the football without all the rest of it? I mean, it could work both ways for him.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure he does want to concentrate on the football more, but he is a micromanaging boss, and I'm not sure he could cope with that. What job do I see him taking? I could see him doing something within the under-21 setup. Perhaps that might actually suit him. Less pressure, and he's well thought of, I think, as a bright English manager. Gareth Southgate wasn't hugely successful before he got into it, was he? So maybe something like that. I don't know. I honestly can't see him taking another club on, really. He won't have that same connection. He really won't.
Bristol City, I think. He can do it from his house easy enough, and he would be given a lot of freedom there. I think they would be glad to have him. He needs to be really careful. I think there'll be one word echoing in his head, and that's Kerbishley, Alan Kerbishley at Charlton, who did a very similar job to Eddie and created a team that played wonderful football in the Premier League and was touted around for a lot of jobs. Then they got relegated and they parted company with Alan Kerbishley, and everyone said, well, it's only a matter of time before he springs up in another job. He's never worked again. So I just think you've got to be careful when you take a sabbatical, that sabbatical is probably at tops 4 or 5 months of really intensive learning and personal development or whatever he chooses. But then he needs to come back and he needs to get a championship side or above. Else he's in danger of will be his footnote. So I think he'll be back sooner than people think.
Neil, do you think that, obviously in your lifetime supporting AFC Bournemouth, you've seen many Cherries managers, come and go, but, football as a whole, it's almost a weekly occurrence. But do you think that there will have been, any ideas from the board at this stage about who could potentially fill his shoes, or do you think there are conversations that perhaps have not been had yet?
I think there'll be. You'd hope that they would always have had a plan B. I mean, if they're a well-run outfit, they would have. They should have a replacement for every player and every member of the management team. So you hope they would have someone. I mean, I mean, the one I would love to take a punt on is Gareth Ainsworth.
Yeah. I mean, and Neil and Jeff, have you got any preferences from the names that you see about?
The one that stands out for me, who actually understands what the club's all about and has got a similar kind of heritage to Eddie, would be Steve Robinson, who's done an amazing job on Little Resource at Motherwell. I mean, you look at some of their stats. I mean, he was touted for the Northern Ireland job earlier this year. He's obviously a very talented coach. He was here as part of the 95 Great Escape team, and played at Wembley with us as well in that final years ago. So Robbo understands where the club has come from, and I think he knows a lot of the players. I mean, he played with Fletch, so he knows a lot of the players, which might be helpful, might not be. But what would he see? He'd see a team that's got bigger resources than Motherwell, and he's got the opportunity to prove himself in Championship and then take that forward into the Premier League, hopefully. And I think that could be really attractive to him. If we do go for somebody who knows the Championship well, I see Paul Cook from Wigan is current favourite, and all the reports I've read of him, he's a decent manager. But honestly, I'm just not sure anybody from outside can really step in and make a difference straight away.
Neil was shaking his head at Paul Cook, but he was nodding at Steve Robinson. Neil, leaving Motherwell from the Scottish Premiership into AFC Bournemouth, small club in the Championship, would that be a step down for him, or would it be pretty much a sideways step?
Steve Robinson, I wasn't shaking my head at him. I'd love to see Steve Robinson. He'd probably be my top three. Would be Pearson, Robinson, and Ainsworth for me. I was shaking my head at Paul Cook because if I have to listen to him on the radio, I don't think I'm not sure I'll carry on going because he just drives me insane with his football manager scouse drivel.
Obviously, I think in the Championship, when you've got a manager with the caliber of Eddie Howe, that is obviously there's the story that goes with it. League Two, League One, Championship, Premier League, kept us in there for 5 seasons. Obviously got a 9th place finish, known for an attractive brand of football, known for bringing through young up and coming players. You can see with the players that we've signed and even sold on. I mean, Tyrone Mings barely played, and his stock, I mean, we almost tripled his value. David Brooks, Aaron Ramsdale, Callum Wilson, Josh King. We could go, forever with this. He's obviously got a lot of people that, love his brand of football, love his managerial style, and a lot of players also buy into him as well. How much of a loss is it going to be to not have just his name as our manager in the Championship? Because how attractive are we now without Howe? Would we be as attractive with, I don't know, Steve Robinson or any other names that you said, like Nigel Pearson, for instance, Jeff?
Yeah, I think it's. I think that's a really good question. He's got a lot of charisma and he's got a lot of kudos in the way he coaches. His reputation and stock is very high for improving players, so I'm sure that does make a difference. The key will be, I think, what the club actually put down as their vision for the future, and whether players buy into that going forwards. Less so about the charisma of the manager, certainly in the early days. One thing I would say about the successor as well is the one time that we lost Eddie when he went to Burnley, Lee Bradbury took over and was kind of trying to do Eddie light at that time, which worked for a period. He was liked internally. That was definitely that internal continuity appointment, but it all kind of fell apart. And then there was the Paul Groves, Sean Brooks again. There was a kind of, Sean Brooks and Paul Groves were both from the U team, but with a different kind of vision. Again, internal appointments didn't work. So, we need to be really careful about, if it is an internal appointment, what are we actually expecting them to do? Because I think JT will try and manage like Eddie if he gets the job. but he ain't Eddie, and that I think will create more issues than solutions.
Yeah, big time. I mean, Neil, Eddie worked wonders with us, and what he did was unbelievable. But let's just balance this up a little bit. He wasn't without his weaknesses, was he? And this has been one of the worst footballing seasons, with probably one of the best squads that we've got in a long time. So he's not without fault. And any other club in the Premier League would have probably sacked their manager. I think he had a bit of a green card to last until the end of the season. He's parted company, which is the right way for him to go. I think it would have been wrong for him to be sacked. But let's just talk about, the reasons why perhaps it could be a good thing for us, because the last sort of 12 months has not been brilliant, has it?
Yeah, I mean, this is us trying to end on a high, I guess, isn't it? But the I think certainly things have gone stale, that's for sure. So it's interesting, a lot of the players who are tweeting frantically about how disappointed and gutted they are. Some of them have put in just 50% of effort in those 5 relegation games against Christmas. He'd still be here. And for whatever reason, he lost the ability to get the players to go out on the pitch and fight tooth and nail for him. And I think it frustrated him more than ever. Logically, the upside will be that when someone comes in, that anyone that was comfortable or having an easy ride will no longer be comfortable and having an easy ride. The downside is they won't have all of the other magical things that we saw from Eddie from up until the last 18 months. With a good appointment, so if Steve Robinson came or Gareth Ainsworth came or someone like that, and they set their own mark on the club, brought some players in, there's a bedrock of great players there, introduced a new style, then it could be really entertaining. I just think I rather would have done the Championship with Eddie.
Yeah, I think I'm on board with that. But Jeff, there were many a podcast that we recorded together, and also with Neil, where there were square pegs in round holes, and players were being played out of position, and substitutions were being made at different times, and formations we looked at even before the game, thinking what on earth is he doing there? So he wasn't without fault. And do you just think sometimes when you're consumed within the bubble that you've basically created, you sometimes lose your head a bit, and the lack of having any external factors has perhaps caused this situation that we're in today?
I think that's a very valid point. I mean, he was really stubborn, and you saw that a lot this season. I think also the number of times that we as fans felt tactically, Eddie, you've got it wrong. It's probably more so this season than any other time. I think he seemed to lose that belief in himself that he could make a game-changing substitution or tweak things, and that in-game kind of tactical nous. I mean, I remember when we were talking about the Newcastle game, I mean, to see him outwitted by someone like Steve Bruce, no disrespect, but actually loads of disrespect. That didn't seem to me the Eddie of a few seasons ago.
No, and Kirk Tovey on the chat that we did immediately after the news said that it was personified by his selection of team against Everton, where it was almost like he was throwing all his eggs in one basket with the formation that he put out there. It is a funny one, but overall, we cannot deny what an incredible job he's done. I just kind of wish it happened in different circumstances, whereby we were still in the Premier League, but now it sort of looks like a bit of a failure where we've got not much of a legacy, Neil. And what legacy is there? Because the training ground, I would have thought that if that was going ahead, there would be no doubt that Eddie would want to stay and see it through. But I mean, we don't know with regards to that, but what have we got from this 5-year stint in the Premier League?
Nothing. So, and that's the very frustrating and very Bournemouth story of the whole era, is that only we could get 600 million quid and not build a stadium with it, and instead we bought, and I know we've made a lot of great signings, but we could have built a stadium for the money that we spent on Graben, Solanke, Ibe and the Phobie. none of which we ever used really, because we always had the same players that kept us up, and that's the frustrating side. That as a business model, it's been the most flawed 5 years you could ever anticipate, because we should have built a stadium, and Eddie should have left on the back of a good season and gone on to a better job, and we should have had a successor lined up. That's how you would run a successful business. Unfortunately, we've had many years of not running a successful business and being a bit tin pot, and so as it stands, we're probably going to have a big struggle in the Championship next year with exactly the same stadium and 600 million quid's floated away.
Do you think it's almost, Neil, do you think we almost did it too much the wrong way round? Because obviously the focus was on retaining Premier League status. Therefore, we bought the players that Howe needed, spent a lot of money on them, and yet the infrastructure was almost, a secondary thought. And it was only after a couple of seasons where we had to talk about stadium expansions and stuff, and that didn't really happen. And then the training ground, was it going to happen? Will it? Won't it? And finally, the land was cleared. I mean, nothing's been sort of built yet, and we don't know whether it will. But do you think there was almost too much focus on the playing side?
100%. And I think, if you were going to be quite harsh on Eddie, I think he was part of that. I think he was part of the decision-making process that decided pretty early on that staying in the Premier League was key to unlocking the 110 million every year. And therefore, he needed 40-50 million pounds worth of players every year to get the 110 million. And ultimately, he probably didn't, because all he ever did was go back to the team that got him up for the first 3 years. They'd have comfortably stayed in that division, and we could have done something to have built an infrastructure for the future. And I think that'll be a huge regret.
Jeff, hindsight is a wonderful thing, isn't it? And if we had finished 17th for a number of seasons in a row with the bare bones of squad and just spending frugally like a lot of Premier League teams sometimes do, but still manage to retain their status, we could have come out with this training ground already built, maybe a new stadium in the pipeline, or sort of under development now. Do you think Eddie Howe almost had too much say in how money was spent, perhaps?
Yeah, quite probably. I think the one thing that we have got after these 5 years is, we've got a bit more respect from other football clubs, because, I don't think there was only one of the top 6 sides that we haven't beaten in the last 5 years. And I certainly know that Chelsea fans are delighted to see us go down. So, I think probably as a football club, we're now better known, but that's valueless ultimately. The stadium has been, that has been such an issue for so many years. Even the current stadium, when that got built, how many times have we talked about increasing the capacity of that stadium, buying it back so that we actually own it? We can't do that deal, so we can't actually do anything on that side. All the sort of planning issues with the council about where we do build, and all the infrastructure development that would need as well to support it. It's gone on and on and on. And even when we were rising from League Two, League One, Championship, it's still been an issue, and we've not been successfully able to resolve that. And I have no idea why that problem seems so big that we can't solve it, because it's fundamental to the success of the club, and we should have made progress in the last couple of years. We should at least be building it.
Yeah, and Neil, what do you think fuels Maxim? Because he put out that really positive statement on Tuesday about, I'm committed to getting us, back into the Premier League. But I don't know, it just seems such a tough ask now. I don't know whether at that stage he knew what Eddie was going to do or whether it wasn't. But it's probably easier for him to cut his losses and recoup what he can and run. But do you think that was lip service, what he said on Tuesday? Or do you think it was almost, something to maybe try to, coax Eddie into staying, or maybe make us an attractive proposition for a manager that wants to come in to think, I'll have resources to try to get this club back into the top flight? What makes him stay on? Because for all intents and purposes, he'd be better off leaving.
But I think that statement was a PR statement to the fans. I think he would have known that the discussions were ongoing. I think he would have wanted to have put some sort of stake in the ground to the fans to say, look, we're trying to keep Eddie. I think he would have been advised to put a statement out along those lines. Because if you think about it, what's the opposite of that statement? That's something that you just can't say.
Yeah.
I think from him, it's difficult without knowing his business interests. Everything is worth an awful lot less than it was 6 months ago. So it's not as simple as being able to cut your losses and run. I think if he wants to get his money back out of the club, then he needs to get it back into the Premier League, because there will be no money now. Yeah, the problem, going back to what Jeff said, was that when you don't improve your infrastructure, your chances of coming back are slimmer. So I would have much rather that we put money into a stadium and a training ground and got relegated, because at some point in the next 20 years, there's a much stronger chance you can come back. Now we're going to be, with financial fair play, we're going to be judged on a very small income. And unless we find another Eddie Howe, we are potentially heading back to where we've spent most of our life.
That's the horrible thought. It really is. And like I say, hindsight is a wonderful thing. And it's just a shame that we're in this position now with, not much to show for it. Few fans, Jeff, calling for a statue to Eddie Howe. Is that something that you'd subscribe to?
As a minimum, I'd name the training ground after him when it gets built. Maybe the new stadium should be named after him when it gets built. Those would be suitable legacies. Statues. Ever since that Cristiano Ronaldo effort, I'm not a big fan of statues. They can look rubbish, and they're not the same as the real person. I don't think we're a statue sort of club anyway. Probably the council would probably object, and we wouldn't be able to get planning permission for it.
Yeah, go on, Neil.
I think you need to die to get a statue. That's my take on it. I just think statues are for dead people, aren't they? And I don't think Eddie Howe would want all that crap on the unveiling of a statue. No. I think name a stand, name a training ground, all of that's great, but statues are for dead people.
Well, it feels like he has, to be fair. It is this kind of funereal, sort of atmosphere at the moment. But 5 weeks to go then, and it's going to be a very interesting one, Jeff, isn't it? And there's going to be a lot of movement. New manager being named, etc. And it's got to be surely a season of stability now. You can't. If somehow by some miracle we manage to get promoted this season, whoever's in charge, arguably it would be a bigger achievement than what Eddie achieved, perhaps. Given what's gone on beforehand.
One of the big things in favour of the new coach will be there won't be any fans for the first few games for however long, we don't know. That could be October. It could change, could stretch out longer than that. And that will give him a chance to actually work with the players without any pressure from screaming fans or Eddie Howe chants coming from raining down from the sides, which I think will actually be helpful. So he'll get the opportunity to work with the players in the way that he wants them to work. I think for me, it's important that we keep a Bournemouth style. I don't want to see long ball a la Jimmy Quinn coming into the team, and I still believe that critical to all of that is going to be who we hold on to going forwards. Certain players I'm actually quite relaxed about letting go, and I think Callum's probably done an Eddie. I think he's probably had enough at Bournemouth and needs to move on.
Yeah. Agreed. Speaking of the players, Neil, apparently, according to Kris Temple and a number of other sources, they were unaware of this news and they were made aware exactly the same time as we are. How would you feel if you were his captain or any player that's been signed by him to learn at the same time as the fans that he's going?
Yeah, I think it was a strange one, because you'd normally think that he would have had a training ground meet-up or a Zoom call or something to say goodbye. And maybe that's the bit that Willow's alluding to, with something strange that happened, because Eddie always does everything the right way. That's the one thing that we do know about him, and I'm really surprised that you could clearly see from the players they found out exactly the same time as us. Now, it was the club that put out the original statement, though, wasn't it? Not Eddie. So potentially that was something to, maybe that was just that we want to get it out there. Maybe I don't know. That was the one bit that was really odd.
Yeah, and Jeff, judging by the size of Eddie's letter, I mean, he must have started writing it about 2 weeks ago, because honestly, it was like the Book of Genesis. So he covered a lot of ground, and it's something that they wouldn't have hashed together in a couple of hours. It would have taken a day, or maybe a couple of days. So if he knew, surely it wouldn't have taken much just to sort of contact the players and just let them know what on earth's going on, because a lot of players were visibly shocked. I mean, Fletch was obviously saying what he said, and there was a bit of a Twitter banter between him and Warren Cummings, and Charlie Daniels very emotional, Steve Cook with a sad face, etc. It's a bizarre thing to get texted to you or see on Twitter or whatever at 9 p.m. on a Saturday night. Yeah,
the whole thing around the timing of the announcement makes little sense, and how it was done, unless we're being managed in this way. I think Neil makes a really good point that perhaps when that statement came out on Tuesday from Max, that there was a sense that the conversations weren't going well, so they wanted to get the club perspective out first before this decision happened. I think Eddie's probably been writing that statement for who knows how long. Certainly, I don't think he's done that, in a night. He's been thinking about it for months, and I suspect that they wanted to keep it quiet from the players for, I don't know, keep a lid on it, because there was already quite a bit of speculation come the end of the season, come Everton last week, that he was going to go, and I don't know. I can't really see why he didn't go on Sunday and why he went this Sunday. He could have made the announcement after the Everton game and called it quits, and I don't think any of us would have been surprised. The longer it went on, that made it more surprising, to be honest.
In hindsight, Jeff, wouldn't you have rather had it the other way around, in that we'd have rather had Eddie's news first and then have something from Maxim saying, I'm committed to getting us back in the Premier League?
Yep, totally.
Yeah. You had a wry smile on your face, Neil, when talking about the tweets of players, especially Steve Fletcher and a few others that sort of commented, sometimes with just emojis. But can you reveal more about your facial expressions there?
It was just that clearly there must be a bit of beef between Warren Cummings and Steve Fletcher, because I think Warren Cummings has taken his tweet down now, but he was quite acidic in his just crack on, just get on with it. You're a first team coach. Why are you writing like that? And then you could see Fletcher's a bit hurt, because he kind of went back and said something along the lines of thanks for caring or whatever.
Yeah, that's right.
I think it revealed a bit.
Yeah, it's certainly very raw, and I mean, you know what? This is a developing story, and we're going to be talking about it some more. So what we'll do is we'll wrap it up there for this particular podcast, but I'm sure we'll be chatting more in the forthcoming weeks and months. Weeks. Neil, you're moving house this weekend, isn't it? So that threw a spanner in the works, did it, or have you been able to crack on fairly successfly?
Yeah, no. Gradually we're getting there. You know what moving house is like? It's a nightmare. So I had to have my mood picked up last night as well after the announcement, so that I could go again today unpacking boxes.
Brilliant. Neil, thanks for coming on today. Really appreciate it. And also, Jeff Hayward, appreciate your time once again.
Looking forward to a quiet week, Sam.
I wish. Yeah, that would be really nice. What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments below, either about new managers, or you can speculate if you want on what you think happened. It's we're going to be on the ball on Back of the Net. We're producing videos, and undoubtedly there'll be another podcast. We were planning on taking a little bit of a break, but I think who knows? We'll probably be on it more than we ever have, and I've got work to do, and so's Jeff as well. So it's one of those things. I was kind of looking forward to a 6-week break, but I think we'll be involved more than ever before. But thank you very much for watching. Up the cherries, and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.